Welcome to the Build Different podcast. I'm David Weiss, your host, and I'm here with my fabulous brother, Samuel Weiss. And we are super excited to have our crazy uncle Don with us. And he is joining us. We've obviously known each other for a long time, and we wanted to bring him on to talk about something that he has spent a lot of time researching, understanding, and we want to ask questions about. The topic for today is sound money. And Sam, I think you should share that video.
I was recently, because of Don, I was teaching the kids about sound money. And so while I was looking up some things to refresh myself on like the definition of sound money, on YouTube, I came across this video. Have you seen this, Don? Can you guys even hear that?
I can hear it.
I can see it.
So, they're holding the two coins and they sound different. The sound money, the one that's, got all the silver in it, has a distinct pitch for it. Anyways, and I didn't know this was a thing. When I think of sound, I think of sound foundation, like that type of sound. But
firm,
there was another, firm. There's this other aspect of like, sound money because, it sounds different.
Right.
Okay, so Don, here's the deal. What first got you interested in sound money? What was the specific moment or event that kind of sparked your curiosity?
Losing lots of money in the stock market.
That'll do it.
And just inflation and low trust in our government. And so, I remember as a kid, my dad had silver. When I was 8 or 10, I remember Louise and Dave lived with somebody in Provo when they got married, my sister. And he was big into silver. So I remember them talking about silver when I was a little kid, right? But it wasn't until, being kind of a prepper and into preparedness, silver and gold and sound money is kind of part of that world, right? You don't have a lot of faith in government fixing civilization, and anyway, so it probably started with all of that. So
yeah, totally. Okay, well, how would you explain sound money to someone who's never like heard the term? How would you go about talking about it? Someone's like, what is sound money? I don't understand it. I thought like money's money.
Yeah, so I would first explain that gold and silver are money. The U.S. toilet paper that we call currency is not money. So one's for wiping, and we pass it around for generations and call it money, but it's not money. Is this a PG-rated podcast?
Yes, this is family friendly.
Okay, all right.
In fact, our primary audience is our children.
Okay. Well, they should understand that uncles sometimes say things they shouldn't, and you have an editing feature. You can clip if you need to. I will try to keep it G-rated.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so you're separating like money versus like this fiat thing. How would you? What are the key characteristics for you? Like, how do you think about it, and where you compare one? And you're like, this is money. This is not. Like, what's the separation?
Well, the thing that bothered me back in the day was just inflation, right? So in the 80s, massive inflation, right? And all this manipulation of the money supply and then the debt, and how did we get there, right? And so when you go back and you study all of this and you go back and find out that in the 30s, the Jekyll Island and all these power brokers, political, money, banks, war, they're all intertied and in bed with each other. And it's just, it's secret combinations, right? It really is. And they knew what they were doing. It's not like they were, we accidentally got here. No, we got here because men with intent got us here, right? It's not like they didn't know that they were going to inflate the money supply and create inflation. And it's bad enough that governments and banks are unconstrained when you can use fiat paper money. They were constrained when it was real gold and silver. Um,
Yeah.
and I've had a little bit of this debate with your dad before, right? Because he's, the economic things that he studies, he wants
Uh-huh.
instant credit and instant money, and at what cost, right? I mean, so this country's been around for 250 years, and for 150 of it, it functioned just fine on gold and silver as real money. Those are the weights and measures that are in the Constitution, and we should have used them because the only inflation that occurred was mining new gold and silver every year. And if you can go ask Grok, it ends up being like 1.5 to 2% new gold and silver out of the ground every year. So that allows the money supply, real money, not fiat money,
Hmm.
for 150 years to control inflation. There's essentially no inflation. The only inflation is the growth of new gold and silver that comes out of the ground. And so, other than a few years where, the California gold strike and other things spiked, but then there's other years that are low. But so the average is one and a half, approximately 1.5%, 1.8% for gold, and silver's maybe 3% over the last 250 years of America, right? That's how much gold and silver comes out of the ground every year. It allows for controlled growth, not speculation, right? And so these bankers in the 30s and the politicians and the warmongers and the German banks all got in bed together and decided, hey, we should have fiat money and not tie it to gold and silver because gold and silver constrains politicians and banks and others. And they're allowed to print money and basically create inflation by increasing the money supply, printing paper money. They were no longer constrained by the amount of gold and silver you get out of the ground. They were constrained by the printing press and what they could get away with politically, right? Where gold and silver constrained the government, the
Physically.
banks, everybody in the past, right? If somebody had a business idea, they had to have a sound business plan and convince investors to invest with real money, right? Not just speculation money that somebody could just go print up. And so, I mean, I had this conversation with Grok. It's like, wouldn't we have been better off if in the 1930s, all those people were decapitated and this didn't happen, right? Why didn't
Keep it
we take it?
G-rated here, Don. Let's
Yeah,
keep the
guillotine.
violence down.
Yeah, well, no, they should have. There should have been a revolution because, all these years later, we have 37 trillion in debt that we have no hope of paying off, right? We have inflation that they count at 2 or 3% a year, which is just a hidden tax, right? And so when you get my age and you retire, you don't feel the pain until you're living off your savings. And then you realize that wow, not only am I being taxed out of my front pocket, they're taking it out of my back pocket every day, right? And when you have a fixed amount of savings, let's say you save $1 million, but yet you're losing what the government officially calls 3 to 5% a year in inflation. But if you go back in the 80s, the way we measured inflation before, you can go up on shadowstats.com and you can see the old calculations they used back in the 80s, and it was probably even more different back in the 30s. But if you use the old measures up on shadow stats, I mean, inflation isn't 3%. It depends on what they count, right?
Yeah, I heard
What they
something like they
count in
weren't.
inflation.
Yeah, and I heard that like they weren't counting like gasoline or like things that are like natural part of modern society. And they're like,
Oh
we're not
yeah.
going to count that, and that brings the number down. But practically speaking, the inflation is still there.
Oh yeah. Well, and they even do it today. They have the headline inflation, which is different than the detailed inflation. The headline inflation doesn't include housing and fuel or something, right? Anyway, just something ridiculous that everybody pays should be in there. And so, even today we report two different things. The data's there, but if you go back and you measure it the way it was measured pre 1980, it's double, right? So everybody thinks they're losing 3% to inflation. So if their wages go up 3%, they break even, right? You get a raise of 6% a year, but inflation takes 3, you're thinking, I'm getting ahead. Well, if you go look at the Shadowstat numbers, no, it's 6 to 10% real inflation. And, you got a 6% raise, but you're actually losing ground at 3% a year. And, you're thinking you're good because you're getting 3% more than the headline inflation number. But you go look at the real data and, it's just a hidden tax. I mean, that nobody votes on, right? That's why politicians like it, right? They can go print money. They can have the Fed print extra money and, we can keep increasing our debt and, you know, it just goes from bad to worse. But I was challenging Grok. What if Jekyll Island never happened and we lived off of the gold and silver standard? And even though they go up 1.5% a year, it's controlled, it's limited. Governments and politicians and bankers and people who wanted to borrow, you had to do it with sound money, right? And it constrained speculation. It constrained debt creation. It constrained the banks, right? Because they just couldn't just make up credit and to go finance everybody's whim. And the biggest whim is the government, right? And them giving everything they want to voters, and voters can keep voting more things to be given them. Somebody has to pay that cost, and the country's paying it with 37 trillion in debt or whatever number we're at now that we can't pay off. When you get a quarter of all the money that comes in, that the government collects in taxes, not the inflation part, but the legit, well, the illegit taxes that we have to pay.
Uh-huh.
But a quarter of it goes to defense, and we spend another quarter of that just to pay the interest on the debt. That's how bad it is, right? And it's, how do we get out of this? If you had to pay 25% of your take-home pay in interest, you would be changing your behavior yesterday, right? Um,
Yep.
and we just keep going on and on and on. Everybody wants a freebie. And I said, this is a generational thing, right? Since the 30s, we've had, 10 generations of people that we've conditioned that inflation is okay. It's not a tax, right? It's just a fact of life. And yes, it was also a fact of life back in sound money when you had gold and silver. But it was visible, and there was no inflation other than new gold and silver coming out of the ground, right? But everything was constrained. Now they're unconstrained. They can print money, they can create debt, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And everybody, after 10 generations of people, we've conditioned ourselves. Nobody has any knowledge of what sound money is or was and how it worked to our benefit. And they don't fully understand how inflation is a hidden tax and eroding. I mean, so gold, it started out at $19 an ounce, when America was started, and they finally, we had a 1 ounce coin. It was a $20 gold piece, right? And the silver coin, 1 ounce, was $1, right? Well, now silver's up to $52 an ounce, right? And gold's to $4,200 an ounce, not 20, right? That's because we measure it in fiat money, you know. Gold to gold, still an ounce, right? Gold to fiat dollar, it's ludicrous, right? We've lost 97, 98% of the value of when the nation started to now. And most of that has been from the 30s and then when we went off the gold standard in the 70s. So, yeah, I don't know that it's fixable.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. But.
I recently came across a thing that was like the minimum wage 100 years ago was like 2 silver pieces or half ounce piece or whatever it was.
Right.
And it translated to like $25 or $24 today.
Right.
And it was just like, we don't need more, higher minimum wage. We just need sound money. Like it
Right.
would work out if we just had sound money.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool. They go measure the average price of the house over the last 250 years, right, in gold, or a nice tailored man's suit costs the same amount of gold pieces today as it did back in 1920 or 1850, right? Anyway, so you can go price. They have all these ratios, house to gold, house to oil, gold to oil. You go look at all these ratios, and it still takes the same amount of gold to buy the same amount of oil as it did 100 years ago. It's just now that we measure everything in fiat money that we've devalued year after year after year through inflation, and it's not the 2 or 3%, right? I mean, where did they come up with at the Fed that 2% is the target rate?
You know what? I heard about this.
You're allowed to take money out of my pocket. That's justifiable theft. At 2 or 3% a year is the target abuse of your citizens, and that's okay, right? When it's really 10. But why is 2 okay? Why is anything okay, right? Why is theft okay, right? Whatever happened to personal property, man? It's just we're messed up. So
Yeah. Okay, so I've heard like descriptive terms around sound money, like it's a unit of account, it's a medium of exchange, like these kinds of things. My kids were watching. Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Sam.
I helped Don with some radio stuff, and he was kind and sent some silver for the kids. And he was like, "Here's the silver. Give each piece to your kid and teach him about sound money." And so we looked this up recently, and the terms that are in my head from that, and I actually pulled them up to remind me because, anyways, durable, fungible, portable, divisible, and verifiable.
So explain that to everybody who doesn't know what that means. Go
one
at a time.
I will make an attempt to explain it. Durable, meaning it has to be something that's like, can't be destroyed easily or can't be destroyed. And gold is it literally can't be destroyed, right?
Yeah. Gold and silver, you can bury it in the ground. It's not going to rust and decompose.
Nothing's going to happen to it, right? It's durable.
Right.
In contrast to like paper notes that legitimately are based on nothing, right? Anyways. Fungible, meaning that it's organized in such a way that 2 half ounces make a whole 1 ounce. It can be divided and separated and reassembled.
Well, I think fungible is about the an ounce here is the same as an ounce here. Like it's interchangeable. Like you can't have like this ounce is better than this ounce. It's like, no, it's the same. I know we're assuming like impurities, like what is it, like 0.99 gold standard, where you
3 nines or 4 nines pure.
3 or 4 nines, but as long as everything's 3 or 4 nines, then it's fungible. It's the same stuff, no matter how much it is. I think that's what the fungible piece is.
Right. So the troy ounce of gold, troy ounce of silver, 0.999 is generic rounds for IRAs. Why the government insists on 4 nines, but it's just a higher level of purity. But as long as they're 3.9 or 4.9 gold, you have the exact weight of gold. Everything after that is, like the U.S. Mint. They charge a premium. It's still an ounce of gold, right? It's ridiculous that they charge a premium just because the U.S. government backs that coin or created or minted that coin, and they double stamped it or did some, creative design on it that's more costly than others. And, it's recognizable across multiple countries, but an ounce of gold is an ounce of gold is an ounce of gold. Everything else is premiums that you're getting scammed on. So anyway.
Okay, so that's fungible.
Sorry,
what was
Sam,
the other
keep
one?
Going.
Yeah,
you're good. Yeah. Portable, and this is one that's interesting because this is one where gold struggles at, right?
Right.
And this is where the note comes into play, where once you have a lot of money, sound money, if it's a lot of gold, it gets really bulky and very heavy, and this is where gold-backed notes that banks used to issue and then eventually was adopted by the country make a lot of sense. Where I can take this note and exchange this piece of paper for gold here or there, but it's backed by gold.
So have you ever seen one of those? You should go down to your coin shop and buy one. Buy a gold certificate and a silver certificate. So they used to have them. I mean, when I got married, they still had $2 silver certificates, right? And so they weren't redeemable to the Fed. They were redeemable at any bank, and they said silver certificate or gold certificate. It looked like $1, but it was a silver certificate or gold certificate, and you could go take it in and redeem that for a physical ounce of gold or a physical ounce of silver, and so it meant something until 1930, and we changed everything and we took it off. No longer were they gold and silver certificates representing the physical ounce in the safe, which was heavy, right? People didn't want to carry around a $20 gold piece. That was a month's wage for somebody, right? Or, well, maybe it wasn't a month. I mean, a typical man would earn $1 a day. That's 1 silver ounce, right? Um, but yeah, you didn't carry that around on you. You put it in the bank and you had notes that were lighter weight. And then they came up with checking accounts, and anyway, but all ways to make it easier to not move the physical thing and have a note representing what your account held, whether that's a safety deposit box or a savings account or a checking account, right? It was just a way to do it. Now we can do it digital. Now you can divide gold into 100 grams per ounce, and you can have digital gold and silver with gold and silver in a vault, and you can do cryptocurrency representing. And so now you can make gold and silver divisible by 9 decimal points, right? So when you go buy, for instance, you go buy Bitcoin. Well, if I want to buy $50 of Bitcoin, it's 0.00056972 something, right? It's anyway. All the cryptocurrencies are divisible, and so that makes it nice, right? And they can do that, and there are companies that do that. Kinesis being one, but there's others that have gold and silver in a vault. And, so whether it's Sprott Money, where they have ETFs with gold and silver in a vault backing up the shares that you buy, which is more convenient in some ways than Kinesis, but there's ways to make it divisible now in a digital world that they didn't have in 1930. But
Hey, I got it.
anyway.
Before we go on to the next one, I got to. So I'm, the other day I was heading into town and getting something from the auto parts store, and I went into the auto parts store, and there's this little thing. We accept gold backs. Have you heard about these gold backs?
Yeah.
This is actually a really cool technology. They found a way to atom by atom take actual gold and lay it on a substrate,
Right.
and so they have like 1/1000th of an ounce of gold, and they're bills, but you can take the bills and like crunch them up and put them in a crucible, and it will melt off the plastic and other stuff that's like security
Right.
features that are on it, and then you'll be left with literally that amount of gold.
Right.
So you're actually paying with gold. Now, just in the last 2 years, I think it's gone for the one that my kids were looking at was like $2, and now it's $4. When it was $4, and now it's $8 for the same. I mean, that's the inflation over just this last little time. So, but
yeah,
I thought that was a cool way of doing. Go ahead.
I don't know how practical they are. They're kind of cool. I was going to buy some just because it was cool. Not that it's practical. I mean, Kinesis or other places where, you can exchange your digital gold for US dollars and use dollars directly, or anyway, so you can interchange between different currencies, different fiat money, and still have gold and silver in your savings account, right? And so when, not if, the fiat money collapses, you got hard money, right? Which isn't paper and promises. It is what it is. So you need to finish your definition, Sam. I think we
Okay, here we go. Durable, fungible, portable, divisible, can be broken into smaller units. And we touched on that, I guess, already. And the other one is verifiable. And that's like, this is another thing. You think of all the effort that they've put into like the fiat currency we use today to make it verifiable, like all the security features that exist and things like this, and how simple it is. I mean, obviously you've got the portability issue with like physical gold, but like physical gold and silver are verifiable. Like it's
right.
You can verify that it's the real thing. And in fact, that I don't know the history of that sound test that I showed the video.
Yeah, no, I've seen that before. Yeah, that works.
But like,
silver.
anyways, I could imagine that back in the day that was like one of the ways that, like, are you giving me real coins or fake coins? Like, let's listen to
Wasn't
this.
that the whole reason people would like take the thing and bite on it? It was like if it was real gold, you could actually like make a
Make
dent or something.
imprints.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyways,
so that's that.
those
Those are those principles.
the last one that we did include in this for my kids, and it is like scarcity, or it has intrinsic value. Like of itself, it has intrinsic value. Some people include this in the list of definition around sound money, and others don't. But I think there's something to the idea of like this thing that we're using to exchange value has intrinsic value on its own. So that's
So
like
like you're
number
saying,
6.
let's unpack that a little bit. Like what you're saying is like gold has applications in industry or in jewelry, and so like like silver certainly has mirrors and all
The other way
kinds
to
of
say it is
electronics and stuff.
it's scarce. It's
Scarcity.
truly scarce. That's where the intrinsic
So
value comes
Oh,
from,
I get
yeah,
it.
is the scarcity.
right. And
Got it.
it's not just the scarcity. So yeah, gold is X amount of the Earth's surface, right? Crust of the surface. You have, and silver is X amount. And the ratio between the two, you know, it's typically 16-1 or something like that in the Earth crust, right? But it's not only that it's scarce, and because it's scarce, it's unique because it can't be rusted and decompose. All of these features is what has made gold and silver money for generations, for thousands of years. And so it's not just that, it's the cost, the energy. So nowadays, they try to make Bitcoin sound like digital gold, right? It's got an artificial scarcity to it, and somebody mines it. You notice all the cryptocurrencies, they use all the language associated with real gold and silver, right? So you got to go mine it. You got to use energy of mining it in order to create its intrinsic value. And there's something to that. But, not that, anyway, Bitcoin is as good as it gets to digital gold in a crypto world, but doesn't react like gold. It still tracks the stock market more often and goes up and down with the stock market than it does with the gold and silver
Yeah.
market. You know, but I'll give it credit. It's as close as they're ever going to get to real gold. And so, so it does, they've created artificial scarcity. It's divisible. They put energy in. So whether it was a miner mining gold and then somebody else buying gold at wholesale and melting it down and making bars and coins or jewelry out of it and minting it and making it, guaranteeing that it's stamped and it's 0.999 pure. So now it's exchangeable. It's got to be recognizable as gold. So all of that creates the intrinsic value. It's the
Sure.
scarcity, it's the energy, whether that's, digital cryptocurrency mining or whether that was a guy on a mule in a pan in a creek, right? Somebody put effort into that, and all of that increases the value because you just can't go out there and pick one up. You got to go put some sweat equity into it. So that's where, you know, part of its value comes from, is the work associated with creating it to a final minted coin. And that's why, as an investment, you shouldn't buy US minted silver coins or gold eagles, or silver eagles from the mint, because you're paying a premium above and beyond the price of gold just because it has a US mint stamp on it.
Okay, if you were to give yourself advice to like if you were giving advice to your younger self about money, what would you say? Like, what is the understanding? How has understanding sound money principles influenced your personal financial decisions? Like, do you see how those are related?
Yeah, so if I could start all over, I don't know. We did pretty good. We tried to live on 75% of our income, right? Um, we always paid tithing. We put 10% in long term, 5% in short term, and lived on 75%. So I think that's good advice. We tried to save 401k and maximize that stuff. Of course, we've lost, um, probably 500,000, over the years while I was at Boeing working, markets up and down and crashing and, you know, um, I don't know. I think I've made more money off of real estate. Of course, I've built a few houses, so that helped. But um, then I saved at Boeing through a 401k and stuff. Anyway, so you still should do that. You still should maximize that. But um, if I could do it all over again, I'd have probably done more real estate, be honest with you. But that's physical work. And if you're not into the physical building, I don't know if that really gets you ahead. I've thought maybe I should have done some rentals, build some duplexes, something. I've made more wealth off of real estate than I have off of the stock market, right? And being invested in the market. And after taking some big hits, 10 years before I retired, and then after I retired, the COVID thing, I mean, 300,000 vaporized overnight, right? That's painful, right? And, so I think I've lost more than I've gained in the market, right? So, and then saving in dollars, which are depreciating at not 2 or 3% a year, but probably 5 or 10% a year, makes a big difference when it comes to retirement. I mean, so like I say, you can rationalize it and life just goes on because your wages go up and Sam now has to get a new job, I heard. Sorry, Sam. That's new. Yeah, this is all more relevant now when you're unemployed, right? So, but
You know
living
what?
off of living
I
off of savings. And Dave, you've done the same thing. It's like,
oh
yeah,
I
that's rough.
well, I think what's hard for me is, so we sold our house, we had some extra cash, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna um I you can kind of like you can look at the math of the situation, and it's not very complicated math, but if you actually do it, you're like, oh, gold has got to adjust. And so like this was like 4 years ago, and I don't know how we got involved with kinesis. Like one of us, I think someone.
Me,
It was
yeah,
you, Don.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
kinesis is the coolest thing. Anyway, so I'm like, oh, I'm going to throw money in there. So I do, but all the manipulation that's been going on with those, and because the money, I'm like, I'm telling my wife, this is going to be good. This is going to be great. We're, you know, it's going to be good because all roads lead to inflation. That's what the math tells you. But what they don't tell you is that the markets are somewhat rigged, and there's paper gold,
Yeah.
and there's like all this complicated machinery. And we
Did we
ended up.
lose you?
I think we had. Oh, we can
Oh,
hear.
there
I
you
can
go.
hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, you froze
Yeah.
for a second.
Anyway, I think we ended up losing 10 grand in that thing, and
Okay.
yeah, I think we
Really?
did when it was all set. Yeah, and just because of the fluctuations, and
Well, and it was
um,
also
I,
because you had to put the money in and then you had to take it out premature because of different reasons,
that's
right?
the thing. That's the thing for me, as a store of value. What I would like, the advice that I would give my younger self is, if you've got gold is a great store of value. If you're looking at it as like a you know
It's
investment to grow, I think that's the
yeah,
wrong thing unless you have a time horizon that's like decades. If you have a
right.
time horizon of decades, you're gonna ride out those dips, and you're gonna be pretty happy. Anyway, I had to take it out because unemployment, and so we did take it out in a dip, and so we ended up losing. But um, eventually, all of that paper and that complex machinery, which I don't understand, unwound, and then all of a sudden, boom! And of course, we saw this year that the doubling or more of
Right.
gold, and now silver's going on a tear as well. And we, like, 4 years ago, we could see that was in the numbers, but it just wasn't. It wasn't there yet.
My younger self, I mean, yeah, so I should have more gold and silver physical for long-term savings, right? So it's not an investment for growth, right? Which is where you guys are at in your life. But as a retired person, yeah, I want 50 to 80% of my stuff in wealth preservation, right? It should be in gold, probably 80% gold, 20% silver. So I'm still investing, right? Um, so right now, if I had $1 million, I'd put half of it in metals, right? So I have a third in gold, two-thirds in silver for the top 50%. And then the rest of it I have invested in Tesla and crypto. So I have in Tesla and in XRP. So that's how Don is invested at the moment. So,
This is
but
not investment advice, but we hope you do well. That's
I will say,
I'm not dead yet, and I I wish I could live my career over again because I'm thoroughly enjoying watching all the Tesla world um, do all the things that we tried to do at Boeing for 40 years and never succeeded at any of them. But anyway, so I'm living vicariously through Elon right now, and I believe in their products and vision and what they're doing. So enough that I'm put half of my assets in there. So anyway,
I will say,
you should watch. Go ahead, Sam.
no, for my part, because back when you introduced us to Kinesis, Ashley and I put some money in there, and we were able to leave a lot of that in there. And it's what
right.
it's going to be a big chunk of what we're going to be living off of while we're between jobs, and that's super helpful.
Right. So yeah, it's all 1976 and put some gold in a vault were great, right? I mean, because I did interrogate Grok. It's like, okay, so if it went up at 1.8% a year increase, right, in the gold supply, theoretically you're capped at that inflation rate at 1.8%. And I said, so what's the value of gold over the last 250 years, right? And so it was like 5% growth. And it's like, well, how does that growth happen if theoretically gold and silver keep inflation from happening other than the rate of new gold and silver coming out of the ground, right? So anyway, and silver was like 3% a year and had a return of 9 or something. So 6 delta, right, versus 3 delta for gold. But anyway, she didn't really answer my question very good. I have Eve on my. I call her Eve.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah. You're
so
Grok. You've personified.
my Grok is a British
Were
chick
you
named
you
Eve.
talking to it?
Yeah, my
The
car.
model, side note, the model you talk to is not as good as the model that you text to.
Yeah, no, I don't do a lot of texting, but or typing, but when I'm driving, it's fairly entertaining to get in
Yes, no,
arguments with Grok.
I
It's
get
awesome,
it.
actually.
Yes,
It
yeah.
makes 12-hour drives go by really fast. Other than she takes on your attitude and starts feeding it back to you, so it becomes an echo chamber. So,
A little
uh,
sycophantic.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
Every once in a while, it's like, okay, come on, give me some pushback, give me the counterpoint, tear me apart, right? So anyway,
How
I don't offend her. Well, actually, I have actually. So yeah.
achievement unlocked. I offended the AI.
Yeah. Trying to be a better person, so I take it out on an AI instead of a human. So anyway.
Okay, so what obviously there's a lot of uh I guess angst about the inflation that we're all experiencing in the United States and in other countries. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other countries that are suffering because of the inflation of the dollar, but also because of their own currencies and so forth, fiat
Oh
currencies.
no. 80% of their pain is dollar induced. We've done
I
it to
mean,
the rest of the world.
that's
Sorry.
that's what I think too. But what are there promising developments or any reasons for optimism do you see any like glimmers of hope, or do you feel like it's just all gotta burn down, or like, how bad is this?
I'm afraid it's all got to burn down. I'm enjoying my Tesla moment, but I'm expecting the second coming before that hits a home run. So, even if I go, even if he goes up 10 times, I don't expect I'm spending it because I think it's over before then. But anyway, so if I didn't believe the second coming was coming sooner than my investment is going to pay off, I guess it would make a difference. But I still pretend like I'm going to live to 100, and I invest and make all my decisions like the end of the world's happening sooner than later. So,
Well,
but
thank
anyway.
you for joining the cheerful podcast where everything is.
Yeah, anyway, so some days I'm like, yeah, let's go another 100, but other days it's like, I don't know how we make three. So, all right, so here's the hope. Judy Shelton, I don't know if you've heard her name. She was nominated to be on the Fed by Trump in his first term. She has a book out. It's about sound money. Anyway, so how is our government going to deal with it, right? So I believe the Trump administration knows what they're doing. I think even if we have the gold we claim we have in the vaults, right? The question is it encumbered, right? So all the rest of the world banks are buying gold hand over fist. They know that the U.S. dollar is dying, right? And even though it used to be 80% of world trade was done in it. Now it's down to 60 or less than 60, and it's falling, right? So a lot of these countries, the BRICS nations, they're trading back and forth with each other. They've set up gold banks, not just in China, but in Saudi Arabia and I think four other places. So they, instead of just the LBMA, London Bullion Market Association, and the COMEX, so those two are controlled by the British in America. Well, so they got five other gold banks around the world now, and Shanghai being the primary one. But so they're all trading in their own currencies, right? So I mean, the petrodollar, what we've done with that, and controlling oil and energy. Um, anyway, it's kind of all unraveling, right? And this inflation and this printing of money, it allowed us to export our dollars, and everybody's forced to trade in dollars for energy. Anyway, it's all coming home to roost. The only way out of it at this point, I mean, after 10 generations of convincing people that inflation doesn't matter and we can just print our way out of everything, it's anyway, I don't know how. It's not sustainable. I mean, so we have too much debt. If 25% of the taxes that are coming in are going to pay off interest, not the debt, just paying off the interest on the debt, right? So um, Judy Shelton's plan back when during the first Trump administration was, it's like, okay, we can, number one, revalue the gold, right? So all the world banks are buying gold hand over fist and silver, um, and there is a shortage, right? They know when push comes to shove, gold will be the world reserve currency at some point, and I believe that will happen, right? Until then, they're doing more and more trade with each other in their home currencies, and then they settle the difference in gold. And so, because each of these banks have gold deposits in each other's banks, right? You don't have to physically move gold. You just trade a note, right? You move it from this segregated vault to this segregated vault. It stays in the same vault. It's just this now belongs to Russia versus China, right? But they're doing that as a net settlement, right? Most of it's done in their home currencies, and then they just settle the balance in gold. So they basically have created a default gold standard, right? Which will get there, right? And so it has to happen because the dollar's dying. right? So the only way for us out of it, according to Shelton and others, is number one, they can revalue gold. So gold's on the books at $42.20 an ounce or some ridiculous number from back in whenever, right?
And they've never
Um,
changed it.
yeah, which is just bizarre in the first place, right? It makes no sense. It should have always been at book value. What's it trading at today? Every day, every year, they should have upgraded the book value based on
Yeah,
current
totally.
market price of gold and silver, right? So the fact that we're holding all of our U.S. gold at $42 an ounce. So anyway, it would take about, I think it was, anyway, it's like $10,000 to $15,000 an ounce in order to eliminate our debt, right? Um, so a lot of people believe that the Trump administration is allowing and facilitating the gold and silver run to get it as high as they can get it before they do this reevaluation. The speculation is that for next year, at the 250th anniversary, they will reevaluate gold at the current rate. So they would be happier if it's 5 to 10,000 an ounce, not 2,000 an ounce. So all this works in their favor, right? And so what they plan to do, because that will only pay off, I can't remember, it was like $2 trillion or something. Anyway, it's not enough anyway, what they would do. But the plan is to issue 50-year bonds, not 10 or 20s, or 30s, but 50-year bonds backed by gold. And so in 50 years, you get gold, right? Not some paper gold, you get real gold, right? And that by doing that, you'd have to listen to her book. It's a little complicated, but by doing that, all the bond market, all the interest that we pay and that we roll over, wasting whatever, a quarter of our budget, $100 trillion a year. We get in 4 trillion or something, and we spend $1 trillion in interest. Or anyway, it's a quarter, whatever that number is. But anyway, by having gold-backed bonds on the long end of the curve, so the 30s, the 20s, the 10s, the 5, and the 1-year treasury notes, right? They all pay different interest, right? But by linking creating a new 50-year bond backed by the gold that's in Fort Knox, in Denver and New York, right? So, number one, reevaluating it, right? So that makes it worth a whole bunch, right? I forget the number, but then using that number to sell 50-year treasury bonds linked to the gold, redeemable in gold, right? So now we're using the citizens' gold, theoretically, right, to buy down our debt, and that people would move from the 30, I guess the incentive, when you go look at all the math, people would rather have a 50-year bond tied to gold in Fort Knox than a 30, a 20, and a 10 tied to fiat money at the current inflation rate, right? I mean, you're losing money, right? You're basically buying a bond with a guaranteed loss in 20 years, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But anyway, so for one, revaluing gold helps. Tying it to the bond means we don't just take it all and balance the budget in 1 year, but we leverage the gold to create a bond that's backed by gold. So basically, we're reverting to a gold-backed currency by backing the long-term bond. So it's a way back to gold indirectly, because there's no way to go there directly. But the rest of the world's going there, and the currency's devaluing. So anyway, so how do you get there? So that's half the equation. The other half of the equation is the crypto. So everything that Trump and the administration are doing on the crypto basis, right? That's why XRP is replacing SWIFT and ACH for money transfers, where they basically hold your money for days, when it can be done instantly, right?
And that's
Um,
creating demand for dollars. and that demand is deflationary, and that's the hope that kind of helps level the balance. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've heard different scenarios, and somehow they're thinking behind, what number one, using our gold to satisfy the bond market and drive down the interest rate. So anyway, by using gold, they can drive down the interest rates. Um, they can push the short-term debt to long-term debt at essentially, low interest rates. So instead of us paying 25% of our taxes just to pay interest to banks that are sitting on paper money, not loaning it out, not creating stimulus in the economy. So back in the 2008 financial crisis, right, they allowed banks to take loans from the Fed, keep it on their books, and they were paid not to loan it out. They were paid not to circulate it, right? All that has to go away. And anyway, so that's part of Judy Shelton's plan was, they got to get all these banks. I mean, we print money, we let the banks sit on it, we pay them interest not to loan it out, right? I mean, it's a total scam on the economy, right? So anyway, so there's kind of like three pieces here. One is the gold revaluation and tying it to the long end of the bond curve and reducing interest rates across all bonds so that our interest obligation on our bond gets reduced. So we're not spending a quarter of our tax revenue on nothing, right? And it's just going to banks and the big pockets that are sitting there doing nothing, right? So it doesn't help anybody, right? It's just they're printing money and they're just putting it in their buddy's back pocket, right? It's just total corruption, period, right? So that's one piece. The cryptos, another piece, and so for years, I mean, that was the whole point of Kinesis was it's out of country, it's gold and silver, it's digital, and I can use it, redeem it anywhere in the world anytime I want. The problem was the on-ramps and the off-ramps. Well, now with the Genius Act and there's one other one that's in play. Anyway, basically, all the crypto industry has sent over to the government, and now they're giving on and off ramps to everybody, banks to everybody. They're letting XRP be part of ETFs, and all these cryptos are becoming part of the banking system. Ripple and XRP will be replacing for institutions. So they run on the Stellar network, just like Kinesis. Kinesis is a branch off the Stellar network, and Stellar
Right.
um, is the most efficient in energy and time and everything. Anyway, so Stellar is still, anyway, it's like 25% of the exchanges every day in crypto is on the Stellar. It's 25% of the transactions, but only like a tenth of the dollar value, where XRP is what the banks and the institutions are all glomming onto. And anyway, so all those transactions will be done there. But anyway, we've left the government into DeFi, right? And so what was supposed to be decentralized has now been adopted. And so everybody was afraid of digital currency, right? And now we've turned all digital currency into compliant, know your customer, on ramp, off ramp through the government, the bank, and the IRS, and everybody. Anyway, we've totally sold the farm. The whole point of Kinesis and a bunch of these was to get out of the system, and now I think we just sold our soul to the devil. But the question is, how will they use? They know the dollar's dying. How do we survive, right? So they can allow all these stable coins that are represented one to one for the dollar to be represented, and they have to hold the reserves. And why you need a digital currency to represent toilet paper, I don't know. But still, how I don't understand how they're going to manipulate all this to work to their advantage. But the dollar's dying. And how do we save the nation with $37 trillion in the next 10 or 20 years? I don't know. I don't see it. I mean, you should still have, anyway, long-term savings should be in gold. We'll just put it there. Your short-term savings should be in silver. And then if you have money after that to invest, then invest. But I would say everybody should have 10%, no, whatever. So let's call it 10% in gold and 5% in silver, and you go pay your tithing and live on 75% of your income. That would be my recommendation. And if you have money beyond that for investment, then knock yourself off. You can go join me on the Tesla parade, or go buy some crypto, some XRP. But those are the moonshots that'll happen right before the second coming, and I'll get to give it all back to the church to help all the poor and needy in our socialist communist system somehow. I don't know what the millennium's going to be like. I'm still a capitalist. I don't know about a religious socialism. I'm not sure how the United Order works. So I got to study that one some more.
This is going to be the best episode we've ever had.
You're gonna have to explain your jaded uncle to all of your kids over and over and over. I bought Sam's kids off with 10% silver, but anyway.
Yeah, you couldn't do that at our place. You'd lose all your silver. I mean,
well, I owed him $150. I didn't have any cash in there. It's like, here, I'll give him some silver. The boy needs some silver. So hopefully, I didn't create any angst. I gave Simon a 50-cent piece, and
we negotiated with the girls. It took. I mean, it
Sorry.
took some massaging, but. We got through it.
It's like you're like, how do we make this fair?
It was like half an ounce and tenth of an ounce, right? But like they were very physically different sizes, and that was a little bit hard to overcome. I created a
problem. I knew I created a problem, but it's like I was going to say, well, okay. Simon has to work for 40 years. He deserves a gift here. So anyway, yeah, I'm sure your uncle's a male chauvinist. Anyway, whatever. Say I had 4 daughters and no sons, so I just like passing along some silver to a bro that needs some help. So.
Well, we're hoping for bookend boys. We'll see if number 7 gets us back on the boy score board.
All right. Well, did I answer any of your questions that you did?
This was great, Don. We just appreciate you taking the time. You've done obviously so much research, and I thought it'd be good to talk about. Obviously, there was a ton more that we could go into, but this has been good. It's I think good introduction that if people want to, read that book about Jekyll Island or explore more of the kind of economics of it. It's really I mean, thanks to you, I went down that rabbit hole for a fair amount, and that was a insightful journey. So
the other book is Judy Shelton. I have it on Audible. I can't pop it up here when this app's open, but anyway, I've listened to part of it. I haven't listened to the whole thing, but I've seen her on a couple of YouTube, so you can look her up anyway. So she was anyway, she's some economist, she knows Greenspan and all these boys, and anyway, she's fairly respected. I forget what university she's out of. She's anyway, pretty sharp, but anyway, she has some theories, and it seems like all the Trump team that's in play, I would expect something from July 4th next year to happen associated with the gold, the revaluation, the bonds, and then what's going on now with the crypto. I think there's a whole bunch in play here that's it's going to happen one way or another. This is their controlled death spiral. So we'll see. It's a Hail Mary, I believe. I don't know if it'll work, but anyway.
Okay, well, let's hope it does well. In the meantime, your advice is sound about sound money. So thank you for taking the time and being with us. This has been great.
All right, you guys take care.